All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Natural Born Killers, Body Snatchers, and the Crawling Dead, all about beneficial insects. Our speaker is Kevin A.K. Kevin is from the East Windsor Regional School District in Hightstown, New Jersey, where he taught English and the humanities. He also supervised the language arts, social studies, art, and ESL departments. He is a member of the Little Silver Environmental Commission and supervisor of the Little Silver Community Garden. He's a Navy veteran and is an agricultural associate in the School of Environmental Sciences, where he participates in field work to develop new and improved varieties of blueberries and hot peppers and assists with classroom instruction. In his spare time, Kevin plays guitar with the Hard Road Travelers, an Americana and roots band. It's exhausting just hearing it, Kevin. Okay, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Debbie. I appreciate that introduction. And before we get started, everybody, I really want to say and give a great shout out to Debbie and Laura and Diane, as well as the other panelists on the Speakers Bureau, whose support and help in putting this presentation together has been invaluable. So we're looking forward to a presentation that will kind of blow your mind in a little way and inform you a lot more, at least, than I was when I started this, about the crazy world of beneficial insects. So we're going to talk about the way insects behave in the natural world, in particular in our gardens, and we're going to think about really what makes an insect a pest or beneficial or, in fact, benign. And you can see that that's, I love that photo of that little girl, kind of a typical reaction to, I think, of people to creepy crawly insects. But you can still feel that way, but they are just fascinating creatures at almost any level. And we're going to talk about predation and particular insect predators, some of which you'll be familiar with, others of which you may not be. And their behavior tends to be parasitic. So we're going to be talking about parasitism and then biocontrol, and in fact, attracting beneficial insects to our gardens. And I hope you have a nice handout for that. If not, I'm sure Debbie will make sure that you get it. So to begin, it's helpful to sort of understand that nature is just nature. It exists in and of itself. It's not part of our ethical construct, and whether or not we see nature as beneficial or detrimental or benign is a human imposition on things that nature does in and of itself. And that's particularly true of insects. What makes an insect a beneficial insect or a detrimental insect? And they're just behaving as nature intended them to do. So it's important to begin with an understanding of why an insect is considered a pest, or why it's considered as beneficial to us. And the sort of rubric is really fairly simple. Insect pests cause harm. That's, if they don't cause harm, then they're either benign or beneficial. And the things that they cause harm to are things that we humans care about: people, plants, animals, and buildings. But it's also helpful to understand that pest insects are only about 1 to 3% of all the insects that are out there. So it's not like we're being overwhelmed by them. They are an important and in very many ways a practical side of the way nature operates in our world. So when insect behavior benefits us, they're considered beneficial, regardless of the manner of the predation. And for some of us, the manners of predation cause us discomfort because they're gruesome and they're kind of creepy. But we don't take that value judgment and put it on the insect. As long as it helps us, that's fine. We don't care how the bad bugs are killed, as long as they're killed. So what we're going to do this morning is we're going to look at some, I think, to some extent, commonplace beneficial predators, and look at their behavior so you can better understand what they're doing in your garden and how to, in some ways, protect them. So predation is really an important aspect of everything that we do when we're out in the natural, or everything we look at we're out in the natural world. Without predation that nature has put in place, pests will dominate, and the balance of nature cannot be maintained. And you can see here one of the insects that has really taken North America by storm, which is the emerald ash borer. And there on the photo on the right, you can see what has happened to the ash trees in Wisconsin. There's no natural enemy here, not yet anyway. And without that balance of nature, these species can really do tremendous damage, both to the natural environment and to the economic environment as well. So it is important to understand as we go through this, because it's going to get a little gruesome, that predation is the way nature works. It's the standard operating procedure that nature has put in place to keep itself in balance. And here you can see a predatory stink bug essentially killing a monarch caterpillar. So just to take care of your creepiness at this, these predatory stink bugs do not exist in New Jersey. If you go down to Florida, you might see them. And one of the odd things about predatory stink bugs, at least in the American Southeast, is that they tend to hunt in packs. So when you see one, you're going to see about a dozen more. So be glad we're not in Florida for these predaceous stink bugs. But anyway, the point is that in predation, one organism kills another. And not all predators are animals, because as we've seen, or as you perhaps know, carnivorous plants, the first one you probably came across was the Venus flytrap as a youngster, perhaps. They consume insects. And even on a microscopic scale, protozoa and bacteria also consume prey organisms. So predation is just, it's everywhere. It's just the way nature is. Now, as that relates to us, in the natural environment, predation it's the give and flow of life and death. But when we create a garden or when we create a farm, it's important to understand that we are disrupting the natural landscape. It's not what nature intended, and that's particularly fine. We as humans create beautiful spaces of serenity and calm and and loveliness. But the important thing to remember is that as we plant whatever it is that we're planting in our gardens or our farms, we're inviting pests to feast on everything that we've planted. That's the deal. I plant my potatoes, and I'm also inviting the Colorado potato beetle. And as we learned, as we were going through Master Gardener class, it's important to remember that key plant invites the key pest. And so as we create these spaces of loveliness and beauty, and as we're growing fruits and vegetables to keep us healthy and strong, it's also important that we should plant the flowers and the crops that also invite the predators to help create that balance between predation and existence, so that our gardens become as functioning a part of the natural environment as we possibly can make them. So a good way to start is to understand that predaceous insects essentially take two forms. There are the predators, and there you can see the green lacewing on the left, and the parasitoids on the right. And just as a sort of a way of getting you interested, I'm calling the predators the natural born killers because they're incredibly successful, and they're vicious, I think. And the parasitoids, which are they're just weird. They just do weird things. They will snatch other insect bodies. But we were talking earlier before we started. I don't know how many of you have seen a lacewing in your garden. I think I have, but it was before I really knew what I was looking at. I've seen the eggs, which I'll show you in a minute, and having the ability to see the hyperparasitoid, which you can see circled there, is going to take a lot of patience and some really good eyes or a great field lens. But we'll see more of that as we go. Just to give you a sense of the size, which I'll talk about in a little bit, you can see, if you're familiar with that, those are bracketed wasp larvae in the cocoons there, and they will. Some of them have already emerged. If you look carefully, you can see them. But parasitoids are also prey themselves. Hyperparasitoids or smaller parasitoid wasps will also prey on them. So it's literally may not be a jungle, but you get the idea. So let's consider some predatory insect behavior. And their predator insects are a good place to start because you are likely to have seen many, or at least some of them. They're relatively easy to distinguish from parasitoids because of their size. They're easy to see in your garden. And there's a beautiful green darner dragonfly, which many people don't often think as a really successful predator, but it sure is. And their beauty is just remarkable. But predator insects they're ferocious. They they take no prisoners. They spare no quarter. They can actively stalk their prey, or they can sit patiently and wait for prey to come along. So they'll stalk, or they can ambush, and you can see here with the dragonfly, they can catch their prey in flight. So as we're looking at predator insects, we have to sort of give them their due. They are amazing in the many forms that they have to survive and to eat. So what we're going to do for the next portion of this presentation is look at some common predatory insects that you probably will have seen in your garden to give you some sense of your prior knowledge, and so it won't all be brand new. So when we're talking about predator insects, as we said, they tend to be large large enough that you can see them without particularly squinting. And they can be generalist feeders. They'll eat anything, which we'll talk about in a little minute. They can attack a variety of insect species and move on. And an important rule of thumb to bear in mind as we go through this is that the larger the predator, the more generalized the feeding behavior. So a mantis, for example, as we'll see, will eat just about anything. And as we get into the parasitoids, the small wasps, they get much more specific about what they will attack and what they will lay their eggs in. But they may have preferences, and we all know the lady beetles, for example, have very distinct preferences for aphids. But predatory insects will also attack large or small prey. It doesn't matter to them. They are really the natural born killers. And some important predator species like the mantids are cannibalistic. They eat their own. And this is where we get into this sort of nature as our own construct, and what we think of as beneficial or not is our imposition of a judgment on whether their behavior is beneficial or not. But predatory insects will almost always attack other what we consider to be beneficial insects. They don't leave each other alone and say, well, you ladybug will take care of the aphids, and I'll take care of the Colorado potato beetle. They attack one another. They're indiscriminate. And perhaps the most best known predator insect is the praying mantis. And this is from a friend of mine, Kate Curtis, who runs a blog. And when I saw this, I just thought, well, I have to include that, because part of what we know about mantids is that they will, in fact, kill their mate while they're in the process of mating, and that's true. About 25% of instances, it occurs at that rate. So they will attack their mate. The mate can continue to, or the male can continue to copulate without a head. It's just remarkable. The way it works is that the mantid will grasp the prey in its forelimbs, which have, as you can see, Kate has done a pretty good job of depicting those sort of incisor-like claws, and they just grasp it, and it can't get out, and they just eat it alive. They just eat the head of the other mantid like it's eating an apple, and that's kind of disturbing. And this photo on the left of a mantid killing and eating a hummingbird caused a great uproar a number of years ago when it was published. There was a tremendous outpouring of we have to stop these mantids. They're killing these beautiful hummingbirds. What can we do, or should we do? Because it's just awful, and it's true. Mantids will absolutely attack hummingbirds, and they kill them. But they're on the right. You can see the mantid also attacking a garden snake. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to see a garden snake, so I don't feel as bad about the mantid attacking the garden snake as I do the hummingbird. But again, these behaviors are independent of us. It's the way nature intends them to behave, and that's how they behave. They're rapacious. But it still bothers a lot of people. What are we supposed to do with these mantids? Should I shoo them away? I got a phone call the other day from a person. This is actually a month or so back. Mantids had come, a mantid egg mass had come in on the Christmas tree, and it had hatched, and there were mantids all over the place. And what should I do? And I said, gather up as many as you can and put them outside and let them fend for themselves. And my friend didn't want to do that because she thought that was just nothing she wanted. She didn't want to touch them. And I said, look, if you don't, they're gonna eat each other. It's just gonna be, you're gonna see mantid parts all over the place. But that's just the way they are. But at any rate, this is Dr. Gavin Svenson, and he's like at least the nation's premier expert on mantid behavior. And you could see him holding a really beautiful Peruvian shield mantis there. And he's got this enormous collection of mantids out there in Cleveland. And he says that we should pretty much calm down about this, that mantids they're doing what nature intended them to do. They're eating far more insects than the ones that we particularly like. And it's important to remember that they are also food for other animals like birds. And even though this was quoted on the National Audubon Society website, people still feel creepy about these things. And maybe it should be, I don't know. But the best thing to do is let them be. Let nature do what it does. And here you can see something that I think you might have seen in your garden, which is the Mantis Egg Case. There are lots and lots of developing mantids in that egg case there. And it's the other thing that's important about mantis or mantids and mantises is that they eat a lot of things. But you can see they're highlighted in yellow. That while they're clearly beneficial, um, they're not at the top of the value chain for us as gardeners. They, lady beetles and lacewings are perhaps the best thing you can have in your garden. Mantids are great, but the reason that they're not so good is they're territorial and they're cannibalistic, and they will attack other mantids as well. So that's just the nature of the mantid. I'm sure you've seen some of them probably in your garden if you're looking. Another common predator insect are ground beetles. They seem to be everywhere in your garden once you sort of move some of the mulch or dig a spot for something that you're planting. And they are really one of the most prevalent species of insects in the world. Over 40,000 species worldwide, 2,000 here in North America. And look at the mandibles on that thing. I mean, if you are a lady beetle and you see that thing coming at you, fly away, lady beetle, because that's a gruesome set of jaws that will um, do a whole lot of damage. They feed on a wide range of pests as well as seeds. They're not harmful. Don't kill them. They do a lot more good. They're not particularly pretty, I think. They're just kind of black and fearsome looking, but they mean no harm to us, and they really do a great job in cleaning up our garden spaces. And here's the beautiful and ethereal green lacewing. Again, a fairly common predator insect in our gardens. They're really beautiful if you've ever seen them. They're just sort of, lacewing is a beautiful descriptor of it. You can see there how fragile and gossamer-like that wing is. They're not great flyers, and you can imagine that they are pretty active at night if you look at the size of their eyes relative to the size of their body. They can take in a lot of light at night, and they feed on honeydew and pollen and nectar. And some, not many, but some of the adults are predaceous. But the real importance for lacewing is their larva. And there you see a lacewing larva, um, also known as the psychopaths of the insect world. These things are remarkable in their ferocity. They're fairly tiny. You can see them if you're looking for them, but they are just rapacious. You can see there that they have in the left sickle-shaped jaws. This particular shot shows a lacewing larvae picking up an aphid, and we'll see this a little more in another insect in a little bit. But they inject a venom into the insect that they have through their mandibles there, and then they suck out the body fluids. But they are hungry, and they will consume about 200 aphids or other prey per week, and that goes on for 2 to 3 weeks before they reach maturity and pupate into that beautiful lacewing larva. Now, this is a really interesting slide to me, and I hope to you as well, because it shows the two aspects of the lacewing larva that I wanted to point out. The first there on the left, as you can see, there the lacewing is going after a cabbage looper caterpillar. And the important thing is to note the difference in the size. That is a rather large caterpillar, and the lacewing larva is not that small itself. But when you consider that it is coming from the eggs you can see there on the right, suspended from the leaf, it has to grow very, very quickly. And in order to do so, it has to consume a lot of calories. I mean, to go from that tiny egg to that larva that you see right there attacking the cabbage looper, that's a tremendous amount of growth, and it takes a tremendous amount of energy, which is why they're so ferocious. Now, I've never seen one of these, and we were talking earlier that Diane has seen these, and in fact got pinched or bitten by those mandibles you can see in the lower left, right there, right by the eye. Diane, do you want to comment about your your lacewing sting?
Yeah, I mean, it happens kind of often, and you don't even see them. You just feel this little pinch, and then you look, and it's like almost clear, like you could barely see it, but you see those little pinches. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't inject anything into you. It's just a little discomfort, and you swipe it off. But yeah, definitely, I've gotten bit by them.
So how big would you say it was when you looked down?
Oh, like a pinhead.
Really?
Yeah, but really like a light green, so
Okay.
it's not like real noticeable.
All right.
Yeah.
So beware, gardeners. Wear your gloves, I guess. Is the way to
It's
think
all
about
right.
it.
It's temporary.
So right there on the right, on the picture on the right, those are the lacewing eggs, and they are a marvel of nature. So that what the lacewing female does is it lays the egg, and then it extends. It also lays the filament that the eggs are suspended from, and they mature there, and they grow in. They hatch into their larvae. Now, the benefit of this, or the evolutionary benefit, is that things that prey on lacewing larvae cannot detect the thin silken string that holds the egg. So that's a way to protect itself. But here's the crazy thing, and this is why they're the psychopaths of the insect world. Once the lacewing hatches out of that little egg, it scampers up the thread, and it goes on the hunt immediately. And they're indiscriminate. They will eat anything. They eat their siblings. So if the two, for instance, on the left hatch simultaneously, and the one on the left you can see has a little bit of an advantage because it's higher up. If it reaches that leaf a couple of seconds before its sibling on the lower right, and the sibling shows up, if that's the first thing that lacewing larva sees, it's going to eat it. So they're hell bent for leather. They'll eat anything. So fascinating that they do that. Now, so we can go from the horrible or the scarifying lacewing to everybody's, I think, favorite, the lady beetles. About 5,000 species of them worldwide, and this one is is the 7-spotted. I have the 7-spotted on the next slide, I think. But you've certainly seen the lady beetle, and you may have seen, if you got great eyes, the alligator-like larval stage of the lady beetle. I've never seen one. I've seen eggs, I believe, but it takes a real sharp eye to differentiate between egg masses of lady beetles and, say, egg masses of other insects as well. So if you're going to squish them, just be a little bit more aware of what you're doing, and whatever you do, don't squish the larvae, because if you do, you'll carry that guilt around with you like an albatross for the rest of your life. So the good thing about lady beetles is that they're predaceous both as adults and larvae, and they do a terrific job of keeping aphids down. And aphids they seem to be everywhere. And there you can see the 7-spotted lady beetle larvae going at some aphids which have clustered on a leaf. And again, lady beetles will ask us to consider some of our things that we've held as, I don't know how to exactly phrase this, but essences of truth. For example, are all invasive species bad? And at what point do we introduce an invasive species for our benefit? So the 7-spotted lady beetle was introduced in 1973 for aphid management. And it's certainly an invasive species, so to speak, but it has been well managed, and it has done a terrific job for all of us. And so these beetles are everywhere. Wherever we're going to find aphids, you're going to find their predators. So another one that you are likely to see, though you may misinterpret it when you first see it, is the Surfeit Fly. And I think it's well named because the common name is a hoverfly. And it looks to the untrained eye like a yellow jacket, or if you see this, you'll go, oh my God, it's a bee, and stay away. But it's not. And the thing to remember about a hoverfly is that it's well named because it hovers. It will appear over a flower. It will hover and move around as though it's a helicopter, as opposed to a pollinating bee, which will go right for the flower. It goes from flower to flower. It doesn't tend to hover. So these are fairly easy to see if you're on the lookout for them, and I can almost guarantee this gardening season that you're very likely to see at least one of them. They're everywhere. You can see there's 62,000 different species. There's a lot of them, and they do terrific work, though they are not predaceous as adults. They pollinate and they lay eggs, and it's the hoverfly larva, as you can see here, that will take care of the aphids or mealybugs. Now, they too are ferocious, and there you can see a hoverfly larva making short work out of an aphid. They can feed upon between 1 and 400 aphids before it pupates, and they aren't just aphid hungry. They'll take on ants and caterpillars, and you can see other things down there. But they're great larvae to have in our garden, and it's nice to know when you see them that they're out there doing the work for us. So I couldn't leave the predatory insects without getting a little bit creepy here. And here we have the assassin bug. a little bit more rare here in New Jersey, but you may have seen one. This is a wheel bug. There are 7,000 of these Reduvidae worldwide, and they are a bug that I don't know about you, but if I saw this thing in the garden, I would give it a wide berth. I think they're kind of fearsome looking, and they are fearsome. But you can see how oddly shaped they are. They're called wheel bugs because the backbone is supposed to look like a wheel. I think it looks more like a saw, but you can see how ferocious they are. Note the size of the dagger-like beak, which we'll see go to work here in a minute. And also you can note the size of the antenna. It's as long, the antenna are as long as the body of the wheel bug. It's a remarkable insect that nature has created for whatever purpose, and its method of survival is really kind of amazing. So here we can see a wheel bug in its glorious red. You're not going to see this here in North America. This is an Amazonian wheel bug. But notice again the rather fearsome looking dagger-like beak. And again, notice the length of the antenna. So these things they're hyper tuned to their environment. Those antennae pick up pheromone signals. Some think they also can detect auditory signals of the bugs moving around the environment to the landscape. But they are hyper vigilant. They're always seeming to be aware of where their prey is, because that's all they do. They hunt and they prey, and they consume, and then they go back and they mate, and that's that. But we'll see how they do this. Now that beak, as you'll see in the next slide, is a little hard to see, but what the assassin bug does is it finds its prey, and this is a stink bug that it has grasped in its claws and turned upside down, and it probes the stink bug for its soft spot in its abdomen. And when it finds that, it injects its beak into the body of the stink bug. And what happens next, we've understood this by saying that they inject this, the insides out. But here's what happens. This is an artist rendering of the business end of that beak. So the first thing that happens is that the wheel bug injects a paralyzing venom and a gastric acid into the unfortunate bug. And the result is, in a very short amount of time, the insides of that bug are completely liquefied. So the bug is paralyzed and everything inside it is liquefied. And then once that happens, the liquid is then extracted, or it's sucked back in through that same tube, or actually through a different tube, into the wheel bug, and that's the wheel bug's meal. Some of these types of insects have two chambers in their beak. So one will inject the venom and the gastric juices, and the other part will just suck it all in. So how nature came up with this is just a remarkable thing. And when you consider the way evolution works, it gives us pause. Like, how does something this sophisticated and this complicated come to be? Well, we have no answers, but I think it gives us pause to, even though it's creepy, imagine that nature is a wonder, as crazy as it might be. So you can see here on the left, the big-eyed bug, so named because of its big eyes, and it is predatory in the same way of the wheel bug. It's got its beak into an aphid there. So that's basically going to be it on the predator insects, and we'll just take a couple of minutes here and review. Remember that they're easy to see, so you're likely to see them in your garden. They are agile and ferocious hunters. They can stalk, ambush, and they can fly. They're generalist feeders. They may have preferences, they may not. They will attack other prey, both smaller and larger than themselves. Remember that some of these predatory insects are cannibalistic, and their diet also includes other beneficial insects. So natural born killers is where we'll take a break now, and we'll see if we have any questions out there in radio land.
Okay, one that I have no idea. Do you know the ratio of insects to humans?
We're gonna
don't have that.
talk about that. We will talk
Okay.
about that. But they outnumber us by zillions to one. So,
Yeah. And should we leave assassins alone or kill them? Are they good or bad?
leave them be. Leave them be.
Yeah.
They're good.
Beautiful.
Look, if you're going down south, you should especially leave them alone. Because the assassin bugs are the ones that transmit Chagas disease, sometimes known as kissing disease. You don't
Mhm.
want anything to do with these things. Give them a very wide berth. But we don't have to worry about that up here in Jersey. If you see them, just leave them be. They can inflict a bite, but why you would handle something that gruesome is beyond me. Just like I don't know.
Also, this is a question that I get a lot. If I add ladybugs to my garden, will they stay local or fly off?
We're gonna talk about that later. But
Okay.
I think the was it the song or the nursery rhyme? Ladybug, ladybug, fly away home. They're gonna fly. The ladybug's gonna do what a ladybug's gonna do.
Right. Okay. And
Okay.
there were a couple questions or remarks about the praying mantis that there is a native one, the Carolina one, and that doesn't seem to be as ferocious as the introduced one as far as like going after snakes and hummingbirds. So
Well,
they're both non-discriminate
they
predators.
are. Right. And the other, I mean, there's so many species. Some are going to be good, some are going to be bad. As again, it's our judgment of whether they're good or they're bad. They're doing what nature intends them to do, and if it happens to get in our way, we don't like it, so we get rid of them. That's an individual choice. You can do what you want, but the Chinese mantis, which is an invasive, what we would call an invasive species, is larger than our typical native mantis. But we're seeing, or at least entomologists are seeing, that the side benefit of the Chinese mantis is that it's eating the spotted lanternfly. So it's hard to know. It's really hard to know what to do. I think we should basically leave that to the entomologists, who will hopefully save us from the spotted lanternfly. Because the spotted
That's great.
lanternfly, no,
Go ahead.
it's
No,
just a
that was
natural.
one.
Go ahead,
Go
Diane.
ahead.
No, I'm just saying that the Chinese mantis, its natural prey is the spotted lanternfly. So they're both here. Let's let them work it out.
Yeah, and that was a question which I didn't realize. Are there any natural predators to the spotted lanternfly? So good.
Not enough.
Yep.
But that's what we have here.
Yeah.
Not particularly on purpose, but there. Okay,
All right, moving on.
moving on. So I'm going to do a little. I would do some audience participation here, but I want you to think about this. So the question is, which taxonomic order of insects has the highest number of species? And again, just let's be clear about this. I'm not talking about the largest number in the world by population, but which order is the most diverse in terms of its species? Is it beetles, flies, mosquitoes, and gnats, ants, bees, and wasps, moths, butterflies, crickets, grasshoppers, or locusts? Right? And if we were together, I'd ask you to raise your hand, but we're not together, and I don't want you to raise your hand. So make your choice, hold it to yourself, and here are the answers in order. So the order, and this is a recent change. The order of insects that has the most number of species is Hymenoptera, which are ants, bees, and wasps. It used to be Coleoptera, which were the beetles, but they've since been supplanted by Hymenoptera. And within the Hymenoptera order, wasps predominate. And there are more, that number of more than 500,000 species is probably low because entomologists are now beginning to find that for every species of beetle, or for at least the numbers that they're finding, there are 2 to 3 different kinds of wasps that prey on them. So you can see here that at least in the insect world, there are so many different species that is mind-blowing. And when you consider this, that there have only been 6,500 mammalian species throughout time. Now that number of 6,500 obviously includes us, but it also includes all mammals living and extinct. So we're not alone on the planet, but we are certainly outnumbered in terms of the species. And if you think about the populations, we are vastly outnumbered. We're successful, of course. These things are not preying on us, but there's a lot of them out there. So the thing about wasps in terms of beneficial insects is that the parasitoid wasps are the ones that we really want to invite into our garden. They will do the work that we will find beneficial. And it's important to understand a couple of important differences about them. So parasites are not parasitoids and vice versa. Parasites don't often kill their hosts. And perhaps the first parasite you knew about as a child was the tapeworm that got into your intestine and this, that, and the other thing. It didn't kill you. You didn't want it. Hopefully you never had it. And if you have pets, you're deworming them and you're getting rid of those parasites. But parasitoids are different in that they will always kill their hosts, even though it takes time. They eat their hosts from the inside out while the host is still alive. And in the weirdest thing, which we'll see, is they can manipulate the host's behavior for their own ends. It's really weird. But again, they're not indiscriminate, but there's no kind of beneficial judgment among them. So some parasitoid wasps will attack other parasitoid wasps and use them as hosts. These things are tiny. And so because they're tiny, they're hard to study. Some adult males, as you can see there, are less than 0.2 of a millimeter. And there are bacteria bigger than that. So as we look at the number, they're hard to know because they're so hard to spot and see. But they're everywhere, as we saw by their numbers. They're just everywhere. And this is Dr. Andrew Forbes, who's at least the North American leading expert on parasitoids, and he's done a lot of work out there at the University of Iowa. And what's remarkable about this, as you'll see, as we start going on to discover what parasitoids do, and we learn that this kind of reproductive and survival behavior is so common around the world that we don't see it, it really does ask ourselves, I think, to really consider our view of nature and why it is the way it is, even though there are no answers to it. So these wasps, these parasitoid wasps and flies, are incredibly, incredibly small. And you may see them if you're looking really hard for them. But you can see there on the right how small they really are. And to the left, you can see that a pencil point is one millimeter. So you're trying to look at things that are incredibly small. But the important thing to understand is that they have existed in your garden, whether you saw them or not. They're flying around, they're doing their thing. And, unless you have the patience of a saint to stand there and look at your flowers and hope one will fly by, you are very likely not to see these things at all. And here we can see just another example of how tiny these things are. On the left, you can see a wasp ovipositing in an aphid. And there you can see the fairy fly on a leaf. And the calcid wasp, look at the size of that relative to a pencil point. And here in the center of the screen, you can see the eulophid wasp on a human finger. These things are tiny. They're everywhere. But I don't know how you'd see one of them in your garden. I mean, you have to stand there and stare or sit there and stare. I have never seen one. I don't expect to, because when I get out to the garden, there's other things to do besides look for wasps. I just let them do their thing. And these wasps, even though their numbers are vast, they still keep getting discovered. This is Erin Fagan Jeffries, who has a PhD student at the University of Adelaide in Australia, discovered a new wasp that she called the Xenomorph. And if you are a fan of science fiction movies, you will remember the Xenomorph from the movie Alien. And if you're not a fan of scary movies like I'm not, I wouldn't watch Alien if you bought me the ticket. This insect, the Xenomorph, develops inside the human host, and it bursts through, and it's all gruesome and gory and all that sort of thing. So if you want to see it, go out and watch it. But this is one of the latest that has been discovered by Dr. Fagan Jeffries there. So again, I'm going to reinforce the idea that the parasitoids, they're the body snatchers. They come upon a larval form of some kind, and they oviposit, or we can say attack, but this is how they reproduce. They put their egg inside or sometimes outside of the host. The parasitoids then are lethal only in their immature stages. Parasitoid wasps don't typically go after anything alive. They live freely and independently as adults. They feed on nectar. They're generally specialists, but some are not. They'll go after anything, and they attack things that are larger than themselves typically. And the larvae will eat most or all of the host bodies before pupating inside or outside of the body. And there you can see a parasitoid egg on a Japanese beetle grub. And the thing to remember or understand about these is that once that egg is deposited on the larvae, it's game over. There's no defense that the insect has against this. It's time to be an incubator. So the reproductive strategy is really simple. Get born, mate, feed, oviposit, mate, feed, oviposit, and you just do it until you're dead in about 3 weeks. That's all they do, and they do a lot of great work for us as they're doing that. But they don't think great thoughts. They just get to work, and they will. You can see here. I hope a familiar sight to many gardeners. There's the picture points out the horn on the hornworm caterpillar, and you can see the brocconid wasp cocoons that are coming out of that hornworm. But the learning point here is that parasitoid wasps are also parasitic on their brethren, so to speak. You can see there a parasitoid wasp almost as big as some of those cocoons, trying to oviposit into the larvae of a bracconid wasp. So it's almost like the nesting doll. They will continue to parasitize one another. Pretty gross. And a good way of understanding how this works for the parasitoids is to consider aphids, which are a ubiquitous and ever-present pest in the gardens. At least they are for me. But they're a food source for ants who feed on their honeydew as well as other insects. And ants will protect them against attacking the wasps. But they become crawling incubators. And the threat to the gardener from a lacewing is that the phrase is that they're born pregnant, which is kind of a misnomer. Because they're not pregnant in the sense that they've mated when they're born. There are clones they are born with clones inside of them. So they can, if they're not controlled, they can just take over a plant and decimate it. So we have the aplenid wasp to thank for taking care of them for us. They're everywhere. And here's how they do it. The aplenid wasp, or the parasitic wasp that goes on aphids, it is attracted to the plant because when the plant senses, which is a weird enough thing in itself, that it is under attack by aphids, it sends out a chemical signal. And the chemical signal is picked up by the antenna of the parasitic wasp, and it will fly to its source of incubation. Or it's not its food source, remember. It's its source where it's going to incubate its young so it can continue to reproduce. And here you can see it's a rather really remarkable feat of agility that the the wasp sort of bends itself in half, and it sticks its ovipositor into the body of the aphid and deposits one egg. And then it pulls out the ovipositor and it goes to the next aphid and the next aphid and the next aphid. It just goes after it until it has completed its ovipositing, and then it flies away, it feeds, and then it mates again. And then it, when the eggs have reached their time to be oviposited, away the thing goes, finds some more aphids, and it's rinse and repeat until death. And so that's it for the aphids. There's no way of getting out of that. The aphid is done once it's had the egg positioned in it. So in about 10 days, the parasitic wasp larva comes to the point where it's going to pupate. And about 10 days after that, the wasp then pupates inside the aphid, and it finishes its transformation in there. So when that is done, then the wasp will chew a circular hole inside of outside of the aphid husk, and then it emerges from there. Now, interestingly, at least to me, some aphid wasps, the males of these parasitic wasps, will happen upon, so to speak, a colony of parasitized aphids. And the males can sense through a chemical signal, it is thought, whether the gender or the sex of the wasp inside that aphid husk is male or female. And if it's female, it will wait until it comes out. And once it's out, first thing they do is they mate, and then they go off and oviposit without taking time to feed. It's just remarkable how voracious they are. But those are our friends, the aphid killers. So now we're going to get a little bit more into something you might be a little bit more familiar with than seeing aphid mummies on your plants, and that's a familiar culprit of the tomato hornworm. If you haven't seen one of these, consider yourself lucky. You plant tomatoes. Hard to believe they seem to be rather ubiquitous or everywhere for us. And they'll decimate a tomato in no time. They'll decimate a tomato plant. But here you can see in the lower right the 5-spotted hawk moth that the tomato hornworm will turn into if it survives. And here's an example of overnight hornworm damage. You can see it doesn't take a lot of time for a hornworm or a couple of hornworms to really go through your tomato plant. And this is hopefully, again, a familiar sight. What's happened here is that the parasitic wasp, probably braconid, has oviposited her egg inside the hornworm. The larvae gestate inside the hornworm becomes an incubator, and they crawl through the skin of the hornworm and they pupate. That's what all those little cocoon-like things are there on the outside of the hornworm. Now, it doesn't kill the hornworm just yet, but it eventually will. And you can see here that there's nothing left of the hornworm. It will turn into just a brown, disgusting-looking cask of what it once was. And you can see here on the right, in the lower right, the braconid wasp cocoons are open. Those wasps have emerged, and now they'll fly around and do their thing. So that's the poor hornworm. Now it's going to get even creepier, or I think weirder in some sort of ways, which is that what we've seen in the past is that the parasitic wasp lays its egg inside either an aphid, or we've seen it on the hornworm, and it comes out and it pupates and it flies away and it does its thing. But it gets stranger than that. Some parasitic wasps can actually, this is kind of a trick, but they can, or they're thought to, control the behavior of their host. And I'll show you what that looks like here. So here we have the cabbage moth caterpillar versus the white butterfly parasite, the Cotesia glomerata. And it's lights out for this poor caterpillar. I don't feel particularly sad for caterpillars, but this is a really remarkable dance of life and death. So this tiny little wasp will lay its eggs inside of the caterpillar. And here you can see 4 of the Cotesia glomerata larvae incubating inside this caterpillar. Once the egg turns into larval form, then the larvae eat the inside of the caterpillar, and they grow to the size of about a grain of rice. And they will ultimately constitute a third of the caterpillar's weight. But fascinatingly, they do not consume the vital organs of the caterpillar because they need to keep it alive, in quotes, when they pupate. So let's go back and look at that. So there's a really fat looking caterpillar. But imagine that there are those larvae all throughout its body. The larvae are consuming its insides, and they're getting ready to pupate. And when they pupate, they crawl outside, and you'll see that here. So here's the caterpillar continuing to eat away, feed away at whatever leaf it's on, seemingly unaware of what's going on inside its body. It's not adopting any behavioral or defensive strategy because it can't. And once the eggs are in there, it's only a question of time. So one of the gruesome things that the larvae develop are teeth. And here you can see a close-up of the wasp larvae with its rather fearsome looking teeth that it will use to crawl or chew or saw its way out of the skin, the epidermis of the caterpillar. And you can see there, I hope the resolution is pretty good, but the arrow is pointing to the mouth part of those teeth. And what it does is it moves back and forth like a metronome. It sort of saws its way through the epidermis or the skin of the caterpillar until it emerges. And there you can see the very first part of the larvae emerging from the caterpillar. So it has now taken its look at the world, and there you can see how many larvae are emerging from that particular caterpillar. And there's a lot. So first things first, what it does as it comes out of the caterpillar is that it spins a cocoon. And you've seen these cocoons in other examples before, like the tomato hornworm. So the larvae begin to spin a cocoon, which is kind of understandable. But this is where it's going to get really weird and bizarre. So each one of these larvae, as you see there, will spin its own cocoon, but so will the caterpillar. Now, it's not a surprise to know that the caterpillar will spin a cocoon where it pupates. But what is surprising is that this caterpillar now begins to spin a cocoon over the cocoons of the larva. Now, how can it do that? Why would it do that? And how does it know how to do that? Because it's not in its best interest at all. How is this caterpillar's behavior been so derailed that it takes what is in some ways its normal function of spinning a cocoon and spinning it over something that it has no interest in protecting, but it does. And there you can see the finished cocoon of the cabbage worm caterpillar, cabbage moth caterpillar, with the spun cocoon over all of the larvae. So it adds a double layer of protection for that. But it's not over yet. The caterpillar will defend the cocoon against other enemies of the wasps. And there you can see 3 hyperparasitoid wasps that have come to basically oviposit in the mass, but the caterpillar defends its mass against, or defends the cocoon against all comers. And it's remarkable. I mean, I'm speechless, as you can hear. I still can't get over this, how many times I've seen it. And it will continue to do that until it dies of starvation. the caterpillar just continues to defend its brood, so to speak. It's really not until it just dies. So the question that this leaves me with, and I hope you have the same question, is how do these pupae exert such amazing neurological control over a half-dead caterpillar? And the other question is, at what point does this caterpillar cease to exist as a caterpillar and is acting like some sort of zombie? It's a profound question, and one that I'm kind of tricking you into with the question. So the question is, how do the pupae exert such an amazing control? Well, it's not the pupae. At least that's what entomologists think right now. It appears to be a fungus, though they're still doing the research. And here you have an example of how this control works on a different species. Now, look, we're getting away from beneficial insects because there's not too much beneficial about ants for us. But I just wanted you to know what scientists are thinking. Now, the cordyceps fungus operates this way, and this is just incredibly strange. Here you see an ant that has been infected by a fungus. So the ant was walking through the jungle trail or wherever, and it picked up this fungus. And the fungus gets inside, if it picks it up in the cuticle, it gets inside of the ant. And what happens is this, that as it begins to develop, somehow or other, as the fungus begins to develop, somehow or other, it gains control over the neurological function. And what happens is that it causes the ant to leave the ant colony, climb up to a large leaf of grass or a twig. It will, using its mandibles, it will bite down on the leaf or the twig and will hold itself there. So as it dies, it's stuck in place. Then the fungus, as you can see, emerges from the head of the ant, and when it sporulates, the spores go back to the earth, where they will infect yet another one. So it's thought that somehow or other somehow a fungus gets into these caterpillars and controls their behavior. It's mind-blowing. Just blows my mind. So this is how nature works. It is just, you can see, I still can't get over. But the thing to ask ourselves is then, how can we use nature to solve infestations of problems like the spotted lanternfly or the emerald ash borer? We can use chemicals, of course, which we've been doing, or we can use predaceous insects. And this is, I think, the new frontier. So New Jersey is really lucky in that we have, in the New Jersey Department of Agriculture, a laboratory specifically designed to raise parasitoids and other insects to help out farmers and community gardeners, frankly. And there you see Thomas Dorsey, who's the chief of the Bureau of Biological Control. And here you can see the list of insects that they are growing to control other detrimental insects to us, the bean beetles, the delicate predators, tarnished plant bugs, and so forth. But they're actively doing this, and you can buy insects from them, though it tends to be pretty expensive. So this brings us to the point of biocontrol. It's an ideal way to go if we can do it. And I think we're not quite at that level yet. But there's a lot to be said for the use of biological control in our own gardens, even though it may not be a reasonable choice for some of us, because as you can see there, they can be used where pesticides cannot be. The prey don't develop resistance, and it just works. But it's not as easy as you might think it is. So the question is, should I purchase beneficial insects for my garden? The answer is, well, probably not. Because if nothing else of the cost. First thing you should consider is the cost of the insect versus the value of the plant you're trying to save. And if you got some of the lacewings, they'll attack other beneficials as well. Timing is everything. You need to know what it is you want them to attack. If you let your beneficial insect out too soon before the pest insect is there, you're wasting your money. And unless they're active, it's pretty tricky. So my sense is you can try it, but you're not likely to see a whole lot of benefit. As I said, it's problematical. And the other thing to consider is that some of these, like lady beetles, there's no guarantee they're going to stay in your yard. If they find the aphids, they will take care of them. But if they don't, if they're not there, if you haven't timed it just right, away they fly. The other thing is that it may be disruptive to their own particular lifestyle. And lady beetles tend to, interestingly, cluster together like that. They fly to altitude and they get carried on the winds and away they go. And when they are finished their migratory pattern, they just sort of drop from the sky and cluster together. No one seems to know why they do that, but that's what they do. So they're easy to harvest, but perhaps not in your gardening best interest. So, phew, that's a lot. How about if we take a couple minutes for questions?
Really hasn't been a lot
Okay.
of questions.
Okay.
Questions on what the egg, trying to recognize the eggs so you know if you're killing the right eggs, or should you just leave all eggs alone?
Well, what I tend to do is if you don't know, then it's probably best to leave the eggs alone. But the thing to remember is that it's best to be vigilant. So let me use the Colorado potato beetle as an example. If you're seeing an egg mass on a plant and it's a pest mass, you are likely to see the pest as well. So if you see an egg mass and you also happen to see a Colorado potato beetle, it's very likely that that is a Colorado potato beetle egg mass. So you're probably in good shape killing that. But understanding the egg mass differences I have to say, it's beyond me. I just wait for the target insect to show itself, and then I make the judgment that needs to be taken care of.
I wonder if predator, like good insect eggs, are smaller than bad insect eggs, because I know on the eggplant, those eggs are pretty big.
Right. That's a really good point. I
Yeah.
hadn't thought of that, but the rule of thumb that we'll get to in the next and final portion of the presentation is that the smaller the flower that you have, the better it is for attracting beneficial insects. So it makes all the sense in the world. If it's a smaller
Right.
egg mass, yeah, that's a great rule of thumb, Diane. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, and someone had a comment earlier on, isn't Alyssum good for
Yes.
attracting beneficials? And
Yes.
that goes to your small flowers.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's where we're headed next. So no,
you're not done then?
no, there's
Oh, okay.
yep, just a
Okay.
couple more, because if I just did this without telling you how to attract them, that would be kind of pointless. So I don't think it's worthwhile for you to go out and spend a lot of money, because it tends to be a lot of money, on beneficial insects because it's too difficult. But you can use biological control by deciding what you plant. And as we talked about earlier on in the presentation, remember we talked about key plant and the key pest. Well, I'm going to ask you to think again about that, and just take it one step further and think key plant, key pest, key predator. What's going to attack the pest that's attacking your plant, and how can we attract them to the garden? So some of these things make a whole lot of sense, which is make your garden space attractive to beneficial insects by increasing the diversity of your landscape. The more diverse of flowers that you have, the better it's going to be. We have to ensure a succession of flowering plants, and also it's helpful to provide shelter for some of these plants. But really, the simple thing is that they live for short periods of time, about 3 weeks, so you have to make sure that the nectar is there for them. and that annuals have longer blooming periods than perennials. So it's important to put some annual flowers into your garden. And the good news about doing this for beneficial insects is that these flowers that we want to attract beneficial insects fall into a couple of limited groups that really attract them. Because the thing to remember is that the size and the shape of the flower really determines the insect that will be able to pollinate or get nectar from it. Because think of those tiny wasps that we saw earlier in the presentation. They're going to get lost in a big flower. They have to be able to get to the nectaries and get out the nectar without drowning in it, frankly. So these flowers that we can see here, like sweet alyssum and others, which we'll point out, come in a couple of families. So the thing to remember is small insects with small mouth parts can't access the nectar in larger flowers. So what we want to do to attract beneficial insects is plant flowers that have a large inflorescence of flowers of nectar producing flowers in them. Unfortunately, these are just in a few plant species that I'm sure you're familiar with. And here you can see an ornamental carrot, and this is an ideal plant for a beneficial insect. Remember, each one of those tiny little inflorescences or umbels is going to provide nectar for a beneficial or parasitic wasp. A hummingbird is not likely to get anything out of that. Bees will get something out of that, but not much. But without these kind of small flowery shows, we're really making the work of the parasitoid wasps pretty difficult. So the first thing to plant, if you're curious about that, is the umbelliferae. So anything in the carrot family. And if you've, dill, cilantro, fennel, Queen Anne's lace, beautiful, really helpful for them. And I always have dill in my gardens, if for no other reason than I like to brush against it and smell it. It's a lovely smell, but the insects really love that as well. The aster family also we're able to get pollen to those insects there. You can see a Surfeit Fly and Gaillardia. A lovely picture, really. And these are all in your handout, and I know I've been going on, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here. Mustard family, the Brassicaceae are also important sources of nectar for food. And there again, you can see a hoverfly, but I like this picture because you see how small the flower is, which is just what they need. And legumes are another one. And there you can see a lady beetle crawling over a hairy veg there. So quick takeaways here as we wrap up. Quick takeaways. So first and foremost, increase your ability to tolerate insect damage. Most importantly, provide a water source, especially if you use drip irrigation, and give the drowned dwellers some cover. Low toxicity pesticides, make your garden diverse, and let some flowers and vegetables go to seed, particularly in the Brassicaceae family. So those are the takeaways. So what can we do? Let's get out there and plant. Thank you, one and all. I know I went on a little bit more, but I just get too excited over this stuff. So this brings my presentation to an end. Any comments or questions, Deb?
Well, we'll get to that in a second.
Right.
Can you hear me all right?
Loud and clear.
Oh, good. Sorry about that, everyone. I have a headset on. I don't know why there was trouble hearing me earlier, but thank you all. Kevin, I think our minds are sufficiently blown. You did a great job. All right, so just please be patient. We're going to answer some questions. If you have, this is our last one of the series, so thank you for being here. There's a couple of email addresses on the screen. If you have any questions about our coffee talks, mgmcsymposium@gmail.com. For Monmouth County residents, we do have a Master Gardener helpline that Diane is manning right now with the pandemic. She's doing it all alone. So send her email at mgarden@county.monmouth.nj.us. residents of other counties and states, you can contact your local MG office. But we're always here to serve the public, so that's our mission. So hope you stick around for the rest of the questions. And if you see that survey pop up in your browser, please take a second because it really helps us develop programs that you're interested in, and that's part of our job. So I'm going to hand it off to Kevin for the last questions.
Okay.
All right, Kevin. Are there other beetles that look similar to lady beetles that's not beneficial?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mexican bean beetle. Yeah, there are.
Like cucumber beetles.
Cucumber beetles, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cucumber beetles are a lot faster than lady beetles, that's for sure. They're fast.
Harlequin bugs. You know any insects that prey upon them? I'm guessing nothing would prey upon the adults.
Correct. They'll prey on the larva.
Yeah, probably, anything out there that's a predator would get the larvae too.
Yes, absolutely.
People want to know where the beneficial insect lab is located. It's in Trenton.
Right.
And I think Laura put the link up there.
Look, just want to add this. If you're seriously considering doing that, the prices are expensive. I mean, they do a lot of good work, and it doesn't come cheap. So you're going to be spending somewhere between $50 and $100 on beneficial insects, and they don't typically tend to sell to home gardeners. They will sell to community gardens.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have enough, if you have an infestation so large in your community garden that you need beneficial insects, I don't know what to say. But
this is a good question. Is the tomato hornworm more active at night or in the daytime? It seems like you only notice it when you wake up in the morning and go out in your garden. I wonder if they feed at night, because I know birds love them. It's like candy, especially like chickens. So I wonder if that's a way that they protect themselves from bird predation by feeding at night.
That's a really good question. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that. But I have to say that it astonishes me every time I come upon one of those things, how well camouflaged they are. I mean, I don't tend to see them unless they've been parasitized because they are so well camouflaged. And if I do, I just take it off and throw it to the ground, and a bird will see it in no time, and it's just it's lights out. So
well, it's possible they're nocturnal because the moth that they turn into is nocturnal.
True.
Exactly.
Yep.
Good thinking. Couple questions about the spotted lanternfly. There's a lot of information. If you go to the New Jersey Department of Agriculture website, they have a huge page on spotted lanternfly. Questions about insecticide. There's a whole list of controls on that page. What predatory bug in other countries eat the spotted lanternfly? I'm not sure.
Aside from the Chinese mantis, I don't know of one.
Yeah. I know that there is, they're looking into that because we're going to have to do something along those lines for it. But yeah, check out that website. It's fantastic. It's got great pictures of every stage and a lot of good information.
The best defense is probably to learn what the egg mass looks like and destroy them and just prevent them from hatching in the first place.
Exactly. Now's the time. Go out, scout your trees and scrape them into a bag with a little alcohol, rubbing alcohol, or even hand sanitizer to kill them, and then throw them away. Not really on your talk. What are your thoughts on garden coverings such as weed fabrics?
Well, weed fabrics work, that's for sure, but you have to find you have to cut a hole in it to put the plant in, and those little buggers they'll find their way out. That's just there is a new product out there called Bevenia basura, which is a fungus that you can spray over the ground, and once it gets onto the the insect, the beetle. It's just lights out for the beetle. It's an expensive product, and it's not specific to bad beetles. They'll kill everything. But I think we'll get there. I think eventually we will find that there are more funguses than we know that are really doing a terrific job of controlling beetles. I mean, I know not taxidermists, but pest companies are using a fungus to control termites. That they spray the fungus into the termite nest, and it's lights out for the termites in a really bizarre way. But it's over for them. But I won't go into that now because I've gone on too long. But yeah, it's something to look forward to.
I think the problem with putting, plastic and fabrics down is if you put mulch over it, it just doesn't decompose and help the soil at all. And I think that's more important than a couple beetles.
I agree. Yes.
I put out 2 dishes around the garden with water and stones, but I never see anything drink. How can I provide water in a better way? I guess for beneficials.
They're drinking. You just don't see it. Remember the size of those things. It's just, I don't think I've ever seen one aside from the hyper. I've certainly never seen a hyperparasitoid. I've never seen one of those parasitic wasps. I've seen the results. You just have to have faith that you're providing the water for them. So,
and that darn squash vine borer, a lot of questions about that. I think in my experience, I said the row cover until mid-July is really the only way I've ever been able.
I would agree.
I think there are nematodes you can inject in the vine, right?
I don't know. Nematodes are another thing I haven't really gotten into. But yeah, but I agree with you. I mean, I remember you saying that back in the Master Gardener days, if you're planting your squash before July 4th, you're wasting your time.
Yeah. But I do think, I mean, but who wants to go through like purchasing nematodes, and it's a perishable thing.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yep. And then you have to inject it in a vine, like just wait. Or plant a second crop after that.
And squash are so cheap at the markets anyway.
That's not the point.
One thing I'd like to interject, Kevin, and you went over it, is the sweet Alyssum attracts the Surfeit Fly. And I have to say that is the best natural prevention that I've ever found. I planted all over my gardens, and the larva of the Surfeit Fly goes after thrips and aphids. And since I started planting that annual, all my daylilies have been perfect.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Wonderful.
I mean, I think it's a wonderful plant, and I really recommend everyone put a few and see what you think. Put them in containers, and they're really a great natural way to control aphids and thrips on your perennials.
Wow, great.
And they also tolerate a little bit of shade. So if you do it like a little underplanting in your vegetable garden, perfect.
And you know what? They'll bloom right through October, November. I mean, they are long blooming annuals. So love them.
Wonderful.
A couple people said we go out at night with flashlights to get the hornworms. So maybe that is true that they feed more at night.
Well, I'm able to save the Q&A transcript, so everything that Laura has posted and answers that Diane has typed in, everybody will receive a copy. It takes me a while to clean up some of the stuff that's in there, but you'll receive it, so you can always use it as a future reference.
One person said, as far as the planting squash after 4th of July, how do you get plants that late? I never buy squash plants. I start them from seed every year. It's so easy. So I would say go out and grab a packet of seed right now and just hold on to it and start them then.
Oh, somebody just asked about the flower I mentioned. It's called Sweet Alyssum. It's that real frilly white plant. It's an annual, and they're very easy to sow. You just sprinkle the seeds on top of the soil, but it's called sweet alyssum.
And then I think finally, going back to the praying mantis egg case, if you see them now, should you leave them or should you destroy them?
I'm a fan of mantids. I leave it. You know, I don't think there's a real benefit in destroying it. I let them go. Let them do their thing, and nature will find its way.
All right.
Okay, I guess that's about it. And thank you, Laura, Diane, and Kevin especially. Wonderful presentation. Thank you everyone for being here, and you will receive a link to the recording and the Q&A transcript for future reference. And it's been a wonderful month of coffee talks. Thank you to all our speakers, and thank you to everyone who registered and attended. We really appreciate your support, and we will hopefully see you next year. So thank you all, and please fill out the survey if you can. All right, I'm going to end the event, and take care.
Thanks again.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Kevin, lots of just fantastic talk from everybody. People are
Great.
blown over.
Great. Well, it certainly was, I think, an improvement over the first go round. So
I think it's more what people expected,
absolutely.
but it was better than expected.
Yeah. Well, great. I'm glad to hear that.
Absolutely.